Hey, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bites' Book of Mormon. I'm so glad that you're here. So this week, we're going to be reading 1 Nephi chapter 5, but before we do that, I want to give a quick little recap of last week. Side note, if you've never been here before, this is a podcast where I just read a chapter of the Book of Mormon at a time. I add some commentary, I add some insight, I add hopefully a little bit more understanding, just to make the Book of Mormon less intimidating to everyone. So whether you've read the Book of Mormon 1,000 times or whether you've never read it before, I hope you stick around and enjoy the show. So, last week we read about how Nephi and his brothers were at Jerusalem trying to get the brass plates like God commanded them to through his father. In the previous chapter before that, they had failed twice, and Laban and Lemuel were very fed up, and so Nephi went in himself to go and try and get the plates from Laban, who wants to kill them, which, great guy, he's a great guy. and Nephi just goes in, he follows the spirit, not knowing beforehand what he should do, which is super cool, and he finds Laban drunk. And then the spirit tells him to kill Laban, and so he does, and he chops his head off with his own sword, very poetic death. And so he puts on all of Laban's clothes and tricks Laban's servant into helping him get the plates and walk out with the plates. And so he gets the plates by wearing Laban's clothes, which in my head is just a funny scene because he's probably a teenager, and Laban is definitely not a teenager. So yeah, in the end, they got the plates. They even got Laban's servant named Zoram to join them. So yeah, now they're on their way back to Lehi and Sariah, their parents, in the wilderness with the brass plates and a best friend in tow. All right, we pick up from there. 1 Nephi chapter 5. Let's go. And it came to pass that after we had come down into the wilderness unto our father, behold, he was filled with joy, and also my mother, Sariah, was exceedingly glad, for she truly had mourned because of us. For she had supposed that we had perished in the wilderness, and she also had complained against my father, telling him that he was a visionary man, saying, Behold, thou hast led us forth from the land of our inheritance, and my sons are no more, and we perish in the wilderness. And after this manner of language had my mother complained against my father. I think it's cool when the scriptures include stuff like this, because Lehi's family is not perfect. And I think that this shows kind of a real side of this family, is that Sariah was worried, and Sariah was beginning to doubt her husband because it had been, like I said, potentially months that they'd been gone. And so, of course she'd be worried, because she's just scared. I think it shows a lot that they decided to include that in the record, that Mormon was like, yes, people need to read this in the Book of Mormon. People need to realize that this family is not perfect. Not just Laban and Lemuel, who are obviously the wicked ones, but also just like Sariah. And even later in the book, as we'll read later, Lehi gets a little bit doubtful, and Nephi is like, no, we're sticking to this. But even Lehi himself, who is a prophet of God, begins to have second thoughts. And I think that's so cool that they include that, because if they didn't, it would almost be dishonest, because it would show like a perfect image of their family. But obviously they're not perfect, and yet they're so cool, and they do such cool things. And it came to pass that my father spake unto her, saying, I know that I am a visionary man. For if I had not seen the things of God in a vision, I should not have known the goodness of God. But I had tarried at Jerusalem, and had perished with my brethren. But behold, I have obtained a land of promise, in the which things I do rejoice. Yea, and I know that the Lord will deliver my sons out of the hands of Laban, and bring them down again unto us in the wilderness. So it's also cool how, even though Sariah is being doubtful and afraid for their kids, Lehi's like, Sariah, I have had a vision. I know of the goodness of God. I know of the truth of his commandments for us. And I have hope that we will be able to get to the land of promise and that our kids will be okay. And I think that his response to his wife with so much faith and basically bearing his testimony to his wife is so cool. And after this manner of language did my father Lehi comfort my mother Sariah concerning us, while we journeyed in the wilderness up to the land of Jerusalem to obtain the record of the Jews. And when we had returned to the tent of my father, behold, their joy was full, and my mother was comforted. And she spake, saying, Now I know of a surety that the Lord hath commanded my husband to flee into the wilderness. Yea, and I also know of a surety that the Lord hath protected my sons, and delivered them out of the hands of Laban, and given them power whereby they could accomplish the thing which the Lord hath commanded them. And after this manner of language did she speak. And it came to pass that they did rejoice exceedingly, and did offer sacrifice and burnt offerings unto the Lord, and they gave thanks unto the God of Israel. And after they had given thanks unto the God of Israel, my father, Lehi, took the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, and he did search them from the beginning. And he beheld that they did contain the 5 books of Moses, which gave an account of the creation of the world, and also of Adam and Eve, who were our first parents. And also a record of the Jews from the beginning, even down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. It is so cool to have a record like that that's so current. Because for them, when they left Jerusalem, in the first chapter it says, it was the reign of King Zedekiah. So imagine having these records that goes essentially to the present for them. Now we see them as Holy Scripture, which I'm sure they did then too, but we don't have Holy Scripture that's that immediate and that present. Imagine, maybe some of the events that are written in this holy record that they have, they remember happening in their lifetimes. Like, that's so cool. Imagine having Holy Scripture in your hands and it recounts events that you've lived through. That is cool. And also the prophecies of the holy prophets from the beginning, even down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, and also many prophecies which have been spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah. And it came to pass that my father Lehi also found upon the plates of brass a genealogy of his fathers, wherefore he knew that he was a descendant of Joseph, yea, even that Joseph who was the son of Jacob, who was sold into Egypt, and who was preserved by the hand of the Lord, that he might preserve his father Jacob and all his household from perishing with famine. And they were also led out of captivity and out of the land of Egypt by that same God who had preserved them. And thus my father Lehi did discover the genealogy of his fathers. And Laban was also a descendant of Joseph, wherefore he and his fathers had kept the records. And now, when my father saw all these things, he was filled with the Spirit, and began to prophesy concerning his seed, that these plates of brass should go forth unto all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people who were of his seed. Wherefore he said that these plates of brass should never perish, neither should they be dimmed any more by time. And he prophesied many things concerning his seed. It's so cool that there are prophecies in this book that we can see being fulfilled today. He's prophesying here that these plates of brass, what is essentially the Old Testament, or at least some form of it, will scatter throughout the entire world, and that it will not be dimmed by time. And that has been true. The Bible has been a very important influence on the world for thousands of years. And that is so cool to see this prophecy in approximately 500-something BC being fulfilled today. And it came to pass that thus far I and my father had kept the commandments wherewith the Lord had commanded us. And we had obtained the records which the Lord had commanded us, and searched them, and found that they were desirable, yea, even of great worth unto us, insomuch that we could preserve the commandments of the Lord unto our children. Wherefore it was wisdom in the Lord that we should carry them with us, as we journeyed in the wilderness towards the land of promise. Alright, that was 1 Nephi chapter 5. Good stuff. So in this chapter, we saw a little bit into the reality of their family, with Sariah expressing her concern, maybe her doubts about her husband's visions, and Lehi giving a strong testimony in response to her. And then we also heard a lot about what the brass plates were, because his family had gone through all this work to get these plates, just because Lehi said that God commanded them to. In this chapter, we get to see a little bit of why they're so important and what they contain. And that is really cool. Because like I said, it sort of parallels what we have in our modern Old Testament, which is so neat. So my standout verse for this chapter, I think, is going to be the very last verse, verse 22. And it says, "Wherefore it was wisdom in the Lord that we should carry them with us as we journeyed in the wilderness towards the land of promise." Because it kind of seals the fact that these records were very important, and that the last 2 chapters of Nephi and his brothers trying to get them was well worth it. And as we mentioned in the last episode, the stakes for not getting these records were potentially hundreds of thousands of people, the nations that grew out of Lehi's family, being without the law of God and being without his commandments and without his gospel. And for God, that's a huge loss if so many of his children don't have access to his commandments. So yeah, I think that final verse is just kind of saying like, yes, we needed these and we're glad we got them. And these are of value to us. So yeah. Thank you for listening along with me. Thank you for letting me talk your ear off. I know I have a lot of comments, but I just think the Book of Mormon is so cool. Just a side note, if you want to read along with me, as I highly recommend you do, it'll help you learn a little bit more, maybe take some of your own insights out of this. There are 3 options. You can either go to lds.org just to get an online version on a website, and then there are 2 apps. There's the Book of Mormon app, which just has the Book of Mormon on it, and there's the Gospel Library app, which has all published LDS resources, including the Book of Mormon, all for free. And so I highly recommend you read along. I hope you do. It'll help you maybe gain some insights that maybe I don't talk about, and I hope that you have a delightful week. Talk to you later. Bye.